October 31st, 1994. It was a cold and rainy afternoon in the Midwest. In the skies above Indiana, 64 passengers and 4 crew members boarded a flight they assumed would be an ordinary trip to Chicago. American Eagle Flight 4184 was a short, routine regional flight. But on this day, something unseen lurked in the skies. A silent killer that would transform an everyday flight into one of the most terrifying and tragic moments in aviation history. Within moments, a sudden and uncontrollable roll would send the aircraft spiraling toward the ground, leaving no survivors. What caused this tragedy? How could a modern aircraft fall out of the sky so suddenly? And why were warnings about this danger ignored until it was too late? This is the story of American Eagle Flight 4184, a story of an unforgiving sky, missed warnings, and a disaster that changed aviation forever. American Eagle Flight 4184 was a scheduled domestic flight from Indianapolis International Airport, IND, to Chicago O'Hare International Airport, ORD. The aircraft, an ATR-72-212, was a twin-engine turboprop used for short regional flights. The ATR-72 was a workhorse for many airlines worldwide. Efficient and economical, it was ideal for short-haul routes, connecting smaller cities to major hubs. On board that day were 68 people, 64 passengers, a mix of business travelers, families, and individuals heading home. For crew members, Captain Orlando Aguilar, 29, an experienced pilot with nearly 8,000 flight hours. First Officer Jeffrey Gagliano, 30, with over 5,000 hours of experience. 2 flight attendants, Sandy Modoff and Amanda Hallberg, ensuring passenger safety. The aircraft, registered as N401AM, was only a few months old. On paper, everything seemed routine, but soon, the passengers and crew would encounter conditions no one had truly prepared for. At 2:50 p.m. Central Standard Time, Flight 4184 lifted off from Indianapolis, climbing toward its cruising altitude. The flight was scheduled to last under an hour, but as the aircraft approached Chicago, controllers at O'Hare informed the pilots of delays due to bad weather. The pilots were instructed to enter a holding pattern at 10,000 feet over Roselawn, Indiana. Holding patterns are a common procedure in aviation, used when an airport is too busy to handle more incoming flights. But this time, something sinister was at play. The aircraft was flying through freezing rain, a dangerous weather condition where supercooled droplets freeze instantly upon contact with an aircraft surface. At first, it seemed manageable. The ATR-72 had de-icing boots, rubber bladders on the wing leading edges that expand to break up ice. But unknown to the crew, ice was accumulating beyond the de-icing boots, in areas not protected by the system. This subtle but deadly buildup would soon prove catastrophic. The flight remained in the holding pattern for 32 minutes, all the while accumulating more ice. The passengers were likely unaware of the danger, chatting, reading, or resting as they waited for the final descent into Chicago. At 3:56 p.m., air traffic control cleared Flight 4184 to descend to 8,000 feet. As the aircraft began its descent, the autopilot was engaged. But as it passed through 9,135 feet, everything changed. Suddenly, the aircraft rolled sharply to the right, a completely unexpected and violent motion. The autopilot disengaged. The right wing dropped rapidly. The aircraft entered an uncontrollable roll. The pilots fought desperately to regain control, manually pulling the aircraft back to level flight. For a few moments, it seemed they had recovered. But then, it happened again. The right wing dropped even more violently. The ATR flipped completely upside down and entered a nosedive, rolling multiple times. Inside the cabin, Passengers screamed in terror as the aircraft plummeted toward the ground. The pilot's control inputs had no effect. The ice had caused a phenomenon called aileron hinge moment reversal, making the aircraft impossible to recover. At 3:59 p.m., less than 3 minutes after the initial roll, Flight 4184 slammed into a soybean field near Roselawn, Indiana, at over 375 miles per hour. The impact was devastating. There were no survivors. Within hours, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, arrived at the crash site. The wreckage was spread across the field. The violent impact left little recognizable debris. The aircraft had essentially disintegrated. Investigators recovered the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, and flight data recorder, FDR. As they analyzed the data, they discovered the terrifying truth. The aircraft had experienced a sudden, uncommanded roll, caused by ice buildup on the wings. The ice altered the aircraft's aerodynamics, causing a phenomenon where control surfaces reversed their normal response. Once the aircraft entered the dive, there was no way for the pilots to recover. This was not the first time ATR aircraft had encountered serious icing problems. In fact, there had been previous warnings, but they were ignored. The NTSB report, released in 1996, placed blame on multiple parties. ATR, the manufacturer, for failing to fully address icing hazards in their aircraft design. The FAA for certifying the ATR-72 without adequate testing in freezing rain conditions. American Eagle and Simmons Airlines for not training pilots on the risks of supercooled large droplet icing. As a result of the crash, major changes were made. The ATR-72 was modified with improved de-icing systems. The FAA implemented stricter regulations for aircraft operating in icing conditions. Airlines relocated ATR aircraft to warmer climates, away from the risk of freezing rain. Flight 4184 became a turning point in aviation safety, forcing the industry to take icing more seriously. The tragedy of Flight 4184 serves as a haunting reminder of how small design flaws and ignored warnings can lead to disaster. 68 lives were lost, families were shattered, and an entire industry was forced to confront a danger it had overlooked for too long. Today, because of Flight 4184, flying is safer. Pilots are better trained. Aircraft are better equipped to handle icing conditions. But aviation is a world where complacency can never be an option. American Eagle Flight 4184 will never be forgotten, and neither should its lesson. Even the smallest threats in aviation can bring down the mightiest aircraft.